Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We are so excited to have everybody here on what is for us a rainy Wednesday afternoon. We are here today for our February meeting where we're going to be focusing on surveys because, as the music says, survey says we love Tableau. So again, thank you for joining us. My name is Kimberly Coots. I am a research analyst at Maricosta College, and I am joined by Sam Homeyer and Lisa Trescott, who we'll be hearing from a little later today, who are the leadership of this Tableau user group. And as always, if you ever have questions about the user group or Tableau or need some help, we can try, or if we don't know the answers, we can certainly help you find what you need. So with that, we have a jam-packed agenda today. We're going to give a quick announcement, and then Adam Lange is going to do a presentation on survey data best practices. After that, Maricosta's own Maria Lissner is going to do a presentation on the sense of belonging survey that the college recently did. And wrapping things up for our last section, we're going to talk, Sam is going to talk about doing searches through qualitative data, which is a real challenge for anybody that does qualitative research with surveys. After that, we'll talk about our upcoming April meeting. That's going to be on April 30th, following what will be our announcement, the Tableau conference, TC25, yay, is going to be taking place April 15th through the 17th. I realize that this is a really expensive conference, but if it's at all possible for you to attend, I couldn't recommend it more. Of all of the conferences that I go to, this is the one I get the most out of in terms of data viz knowledge, support, and information. And as I may have said here before, it's not so much learning how to do a specific thing that you want to learn how to do. It's seeing what others are doing in education and other industries that you may not even know was possible to even conceptualize. So again, if you are able to come, please stop by and say hello. We're all going to be there, and we hope to see you there. With that, we are going to, and we had lots of fun, we are going to move over to Adam Lange. Adam is a reporting and data expert with a passion for higher education. He has 20 years experience working with colleges and universities where he specializes in Tableau, Power BI, SQL, and SAP Business Objects. And with that, I will stop sharing, Adam, and I will let you take over here.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. All right, I'll get started. Yeah, so I'm Adam Lange. I've been in higher education data reporting and analytics for a long time, and something that we encounter frequently is the need to do some kind of reporting based on survey data. And this it takes on a whole different, you use typically a different set of methods than you would reporting on your standard enrollment data, student data, course data, that kind of thing. And you usually have different instruments as well. Your survey data, your survey tool isn't the same as your student information system. So there's a whole kind of different arena of approaches. So what I'm going to try to do is just kind of convey some of those best practices that I've gathered along, and then show some examples along the way. So I'm going to start with just talking about the data side first. So I'm going to talk about the nature of survey data, whether that be course evaluations, climate surveys, employee satisfaction surveys, whatever they are. We're going to talk about the nature of that data, how it's shaped and what you can expect out of it. Then we're going to talk about the best practices for modeling that data so that it'll serve you best in our example in Tableau. But really the way that we're going to talk about shaping the data will make it so the data is usable for you in any kind of reporting scenario. So we'll go through that. And then I'm also going to talk about some best practices for visualization as well. So we'll go into kind of some methods that you might think about in terms of visualizing it, and also adding features in your dashboard for drilling into the data as well, kind of disaggregating. So what I've done to kind of put this presentation together is I put together a sample survey. And the idea of this survey, the idea of this survey instrument, is that this would be a survey that would be given to attendees of a Tableau seminar. After they attend the Tableau seminar, they're given this survey, they fill it out, and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is an example of what it looks like. I just did this in SurveyMonkey, but it would be the same if you were doing it in Qualtrics or whatever it is that you're using. And this survey answers asks a smaller set of questions than you might ask in maybe a larger course evaluation or employee satisfaction survey or something like that. But what it does is it asks the attendee, hey, who taught your seminar? Was it Bob or Sally? That's going to be important later on when we go to disaggregate some of the response data in the dashboard. It also has a set of standard Likert scale questions. Was the content useful? Was the instructor knowledgeable, etc.? Later on, there's some more ranked questions, not a standard Likert scale, but very poor to very good, etc. And then at the end, there's some open-ended comment questions. Now, the thing I want to point out is when you think about this survey instrument is it's got a mixture of types of questions. It's got this to response, who's your instructor question. It's got some Likert scale questions. It's got some other ranked choice questions, but not Likert scale. And then it's got some open-ended responses. So we have a mixture of different responses with different types of data, which will force us to interact and shape and visualize that data differently. So that's our survey instrument that we're going to look at in the during our demonstrations. So that's the instrument. Now let's think about the data. Okay. Whatever survey data it is that you're working with, you'll have to first think about where you're getting the data from, but like what's your survey tool? Is it Qualtrics? Is it Google Forms? Is it SurveyMonkey? Is it something else? And it doesn't really matter what it is. Ultimately, the best practices that you follow after that will be the same. But when you are exporting that, of course, you're going to have to export the data to get it into your Tableau dashboard. Some of you might be lucky enough where you have a survey system that dumps the results directly into a relational database that you can query through SQL. And if that's the case, great, your life is going to be a lot easier when you're building out Tableau dashboards with your survey data. But it's been my experience that that is not the common case. And usually when people need to extract survey data to plug into a dashboard, they're usually exporting a file. That could be an Excel file, a CSV, a TSV, whatever it is, but they're exporting that file and then taking it into the Tableau dashboard. Another consideration that you're going to have to think about is, are your questions and responses, are they in text format or are they coded? What I mean by that is, in your survey tool, the person who sets up the surveys, each question probably has a code or a variable name. So for example, there might be a question on your survey that says, the course was helpful. And that's the text of the question that's shown to the respondent. But underneath the hood, the variable name is something like QCH. So you're going to have to think about, when you download that data, is your data file going to have the code or the variable name, or is it going to have the written out text? So, that's going to be the same thing in your response data or in the question data. You're going to need to know that. There's a lot of value to downloading the codes, because sometimes the codes can be sort of smart coded so that they can clue you into what part of the survey such and such question came from, or you might know, okay, question variable names that start with Q are only should only be accessible to the math department, and so that kind of thing. But ultimately, you can't display QCH on the dashboard. You have to display the text. So if it's the case that when you download it, you only have the codes, you're going to have some kind of lookup table. Preferably, you'd have a lookup table that you'd plug into Tableau Prep. But just something to consider, that that's a common feature of a survey data set that you might find. The other question that you'll have to consider is whether or not your dashboard is going to be distributed internally or externally. Now, this mostly comes into play with open-ended responses. So those cases where the survey respondent is allowed to just type free text into a field, say like, what would you like to improve? Like in our case, we have a open-ended questions of what did you like most about the seminar and what could be improved for future seminars. So a survey respondent can type whatever they want. Well, in those cases, you may not want to expose that to an external audience because it could, well, I mean, somebody could type something inappropriate into there, of course, but also somebody might inadvertently divulge PII. They might name if it's a course evaluation, they might name an instructor, and you might not want that out to the public. I've seen people sign off on their comments by putting their name at the end. And so you wouldn't want that. So that kind of thing you might want to be careful with. Also, if it's an external dashboard, you might want to limit the amount of sort of drill down and disaggregation capability. For example, if it's an external dashboard, you might not want an external audience having the ability to disaggregate the response rates by instructor, for example. And lastly, you're going to want to think about whether or not you want to include partial responses. This is a case where a student, say, is filling out the survey. They get 3 questions in, and then they say, never mind. They leave without completing the survey. Those cases are going to appear in your data set, and you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to keep them or throw them out. In the examples that I talk about, you'll see me exclude partial responses. And my only reason for doing so is to make sure that I have a constant N across all the questions. But I know there's pros and cons to both approach. It's just something you'll need to consider because you'll have those partial responses in your data set most likely. Okay, so now with that all the way out of the way, let's get into the data. All right, so here's what our survey data set might look like. Remember, this is what it looks like on the screen when my survey respondent is filling it out. Then I go into my tool, Qualtrics, Google Form, whatever it is, I download it, and I'm going to get a file that looks something like this. And I've got only some of the questions on here, but you'll get the idea. So there's 2 key features of the data set that you're most likely to get by default raw when you download it from your survey tool. It's first off, it's going to be 1 record per response. And it's going to have 1 column per question. Okay, so you can see that here. I've got, in just about every survey tool you download data from, you're going to have a column that says response ID that usually doesn't mean anything other than just it's the unique identifier of that response record. It's usually some random, like a GUID or some kind of incrementally assigned number or something like that. But it's just a unique identifier of that response record. Typically in surveys, the number of responses is equal to the number of respondents, but that's not always the case. If somebody's able to submit the survey more than once, or if you're using the same course evaluation link for multiple courses, that can happen. But I just point that out. But in any case, though, keep in mind it's one record per response. You're also going to have a column indicating the response date. When did the person hit the submit button on the survey? You're going to have some kind of binary flag that indicates, did the person complete the survey? And then you're going to have a bunch of columns, sometimes hundreds of columns. I worked on a project recently that had over 2,000 columns in their survey data set. So you're going to have lots of columns, 1 column per question. In this case, I've got all the data that you see it's not in variable form or code form. It's in user-friendly form. Yours might not be like that. I touched on that. But this is what it's going to look like. And then here you can see what the full Excel file looks like here. So I've got, even the open-ended responses are in the file. Now, there's a lot of issues with working with data in this format. and I'll talk about what those are and how to resolve them, namely in Tableau Prep. But what I want to do is first just look at what a survey might look like and how you might approach a survey in Tableau if you were to just take the raw data out of the survey tool, plug it straight into Tableau. So let's take a look at a dashboard. And I see that I think there's some, it sounds like there's some good questions in the chat that I'll come back to as well, especially when we get into Tableau Prep. So, by the way, this survey that I'm showing is totally fake. I don't know if I made that clear already. All the responses are fake and they're not from real people. So this is a Tableau dashboard that was created using the default data that's extracted from the tool, where it's that big wide file. And it works pretty well. You know, we can make it work. We've got 2 tabs in this dashboard. We've got this first summary tab that tells me I've got 126 responses. 61% of them are from Sally's attendees, 39% are from Bob. I can see my pie chart showing the overall experience. Looks pretty good, 50% outstanding, 15 excellent, 14 good, so pretty positive. And then I can see over here, looks like the instructor was knowledgeable and engaging. Looks like that's scores high. Same thing with met my expectations. Looks like duration of the seminar was adequate. It looks like that's kind of on the lower side of the rating. Might need to improve that. In this case, we might not know, is it too long, is it too short? And this would be where we could dive into the comments to kind of maybe try to suss that out. But again, one of the key features with this and any other dashboard is the ability to disaggregate the data that I'm looking at to gain more insights. So when I'm looking at this, I might want to be able to kind of toggle back and forth between how did Sally's attendees score the course versus Bob's attendees score the course. So I might click on Sally and I can see, I've set it up so that you can click on these, the chart bars so that it filters the rest of the dashboard. And I can go back and forth between Bob and Sally. And definitely looking at it just visually, you can tell that it looks like Sally's participants gave much higher ratings than did Bob. So we need to kind of figure out what's going on there. We could drill more into some of the charts, but this type of functionality is important toward understanding the data. I also created a separate comments tab. Displaying comments is always really tricky because you could either just, you know, list out the comments, which is what I've done here, or you could also do some pre-processing on the comments to, if you wanted to attempt to remove inappropriate comments or do some kind of text analysis or text mining to dry out or sentiment analysis or something like that. But here, all I did is just list out the comments. But here again, I made it so I could toggle the comments back and forth between Sally and Bob. So I might try to kind of get a sense of what people are saying. Not that that's a super quantitative method of doing it, but it's going to give you some insight. And in surveys with smaller ends like this one, maybe it's not too bad. So when I click Bob, I can see, okay, here's the comments for Bob. I can see what were the answers to the what could be improved for future seminars. I see one says, I wish they would serve breakfast. So maybe it's not all Bob's fault. I don't know. But in any case, you can kind of do some toggling there. Now, let's take a look at what it looks like under the hood. So that's the front end dashboard. Now let's take a look at how this appears in Tableau, Tableau desktop. Because remember now, we're working with the raw data set that's very wide, 1 column per question. So here's the workbook in Tableau desktop. Let's take a look under the hood. We see in my data section, I've got a bunch of columns, right? And each column, remember, corresponds to all of my various questions. So what that means is that, for example, in this survey section, where I had all these different charts for each question, each one of those has to be its own worksheet. And it has to be like that because each of these questions is its own column. If I wanted to get around that, what I'd have to, if I wanted to kind of toggle between columns, like via a dropdown, I'd have to create a parameter and then a corresponding calculation to toggle between them, to capture the answer to the parameter and then show the appropriate question response. So there's two or three steps I'd have to follow. But in any case, though, so this is what that would look like here. So I have to create multiple worksheets, one for each question. So that's not too convenient. It definitely makes my life difficult. The other thing that I would need to do is notice that in my survey data, the ordering of these responses is critically important. I need each chart to be listed in the Likert scale order. Strongly agree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. I need them listed in that order, not in alphabetical order. When I pull the responses into Tableau, it's by default going to list the responses in alphabetical order, and then I have to resort them. Now, the thing that makes that inconvenient in this case is that each question is its own column. So what I would have to do is go into each question, resort it so that it's correct, so that it's the correct Likert sort. Go into the next question, resort it. Go into the next question, resort it. Same thing with color coding. So notice in my dashboard, I took care to color code the disagrees, neutral, and agree in using the same scheme in all the charts. And again, the only way to do that is to separately color code each worksheet. So it's a lot of manual work. It's a lot of redundant work that gets introduced when you've got this kind of scheme. I should also mention the other complication is next year when they redo the survey again and faculty says, hey, let's add 5 new columns to the survey, then I've got to account for that in the dashboard. I'm probably gonna have to create 5 new worksheets or whatever it is. So it introduces a lot of complication. Now, what's the alternative or the solution to that? So the kind of secret sauce I find to making survey dashboards super simple and maintainable and efficient is by taking your all of the columns that have questions in them, rotating them, right, transposing them, so that each question column is a row. So that basically what I've got is something like this, where before I had 1 row per response. Once I rotate that data, I'm going to have 1 row per response per question. And it's going to look something like this. Now I'm going to have a column for response ID, where the response ID is duplicated a bunch of times, once for each question. I'll have the response rate, the completion flag. And now notice I'm going to have all that big wide table that had 1 column per question, that gets rid of. And I'm going to have 2 new columns, 1 column for question, 1 column for response. And in this way, I'm very easily able to toggle between questions, do some kind of universal formatting, etc. And it also makes things easy for next year when they add 5 new questions. They'll just get appended to the file as opposed to new columns being introduced that I have to fuss with later. So, and I'll show why this makes things so much easier in Tableau desktop as well. But the question is now, how do you do that? And Tableau Prep makes that really easy. If you're using Tableau Prep, I'll walk you through step-by-step how to do it. It really doesn't take that long. If you're not somebody that uses Tableau Prep or you don't have the license for it or whatever it is, if you wanted to achieve this, you would likely just kind of do some kind of Excel manipulation to make it happen. Or if your survey data is already in a relational database, you could write a SQL query that achieves the same result. But what I'll do is show you how to do this in Tableau Prep. And I'll pause here just to, before I get into Tableau Prep, if that's okay, and just answer a couple of questions, or if you all think of a specific question.
I think most of the comments were commiserating with the challenges
Okay.
that you have pointed out.
Yes. Yeah,
But
that
we
is
do
very
have
true.
one question that just came in for Peter.
Let's see. Oh, is this the yeah? Do you use short version of queues mapped to long queues so you can use the short version of the output? Yeah. So there's a question here about the coding of the responses, and let me pull up the. So yeah, I've seen it done both ways. I mean, typically though, what I'm doing in those surveys that have a lot of questions, typically I'll have two things. I'll have the coded question where the question column header, or later on the question code in the column, it's not the written out text version of the question, but rather the variable name, because usually that is smart coded to have some kind of knowledge about what part of the survey it's in, or what type of dashboard viewers should see this question and not that question. And then in Tableau Prep, I'll have a lookup that basically would join to this question column. So that's what I've done. But in terms of the responses, for me, I really just prefer to get the text responses. Like, for example, I would much rather have strongly agree instead of 5, which is usually strongly agree is mapped to the number 5. I'd much rather have strongly agree because then I don't have to remap it later. And so yeah, that's what I've done in the past. Okay, so going into Tableau Prep. All right, I've already kind of queued this up for us. So I've opened up a new flow and I've imported my data. In this case, the data is just from an Excel file, but it might be from a TSV, a CSV. It could even be from a database table. But in any case, though, I've loaded it here and I can see the data that's been loaded. It's one column per question against that big wide table. Now I want to be able to transpose or pivot or rotate the data set so that instead of one row per response, it's one row per response per question. And the way to do that is to add a step for pivot. So I'm going to add a pivot step. And then I'm going to get a window that looks like this. On the left, I've got a listing of all of the columns in my data set. Immediately to the right, I've got a blank window that says pivoted fields, and it says drop fields here to pivot them. So what I'm going to do is drag all the fields into that box that I want to rotate. I don't want to rotate all of them. I only want to rotate really the questions. And even there's some caveats that I'll talk about. But so here, what I'll do is all of these various Likert scale questions, like the duration of the seminar was adequate, definitely want to pivot that. All these other ones, definitely want to pivot those. So I'm going to drag those. I can even hold down Shift to do it. And so now you can see I'm kind of filling out this pivoted list. And it's hard to see in this window, but in the bottom right, you can see kind of what's happening. You can see now that each response ID is being listed multiple times. And I now have two new columns in my data set, one called Pivot One Names, one called Pivot One Values. What is that? Well, Pivot One Names is just the column header that's now been translated into a data row. And Pivot One Values is what was in the data cell, right? And I could also rename these. I always do that. So pivot one names is really the name of the question. So I'm going to rename that column question. Pivot one values is the response. So I'll rename that response. And if I wanted to, I could even reorder these columns so that they make a little bit more sense. Like response ID is the first column, followed by response date, maybe, then followed by question, then followed by response. It doesn't actually matter, but it's something you might consider. So I've now kind of achieved that pivot, but you'll notice I left a couple of fields behind. And like, for example, why didn't I pivot who taught your seminar? Why didn't I pivot that? And the reason is because later on, when I build my dashboard, I'm going to want to use that. That's this question here, the who taught your seminar, Bob or Sally. Later on, I want to use that as a filter in my dashboard. I want to be able to disaggregate any question I want by that field. And if it's pivoted, then it's going to be then disconnected from all the other questions. But if I don't pivot it, then notice how it remains. Scroll this. I'm gonna make this. Oh, here we go. It remains a column in the data set, and it's repeated a bunch of times. But in this way, if I wanted to filter by just Bob or just Sally, I would be able to get their corresponding attendees' responses. So basically, the kind of bottom line to that is that if there's any survey field, question, whatever, that I envision myself later on wanting to disaggregate by, I won't pivot it. And then that way, it's just a regular old data field that I can use in a filter or whatnot. So once I've done that, and really that's all it is, then I can just simply output it to a hyper file or whatever, and then pull it into my dashboard. There is one thing I'll stop here to mention, which is that I talked about the whole issue of sometimes people will redo a survey year over year. And if they add a new question to a survey, what that's going to mean is that in your source file, it's going to add a new column. So once that kind of, it won't break the flow necessarily, but that new column or question won't automatically be added to the pivot. It's not a big deal. All you would need to do is, like, let's say 5 new questions are added. You'll have 5 new columns here listed on the left-hand side. You would simply, if you wanted to pivot them, you would simply drag them into the pivot, and that's it. But it wouldn't break anything in the dashboard or anything like that. So it's just a kind of minor year-over-year maintenance that you would need to do in those cases where a new question is added, which is a common thing.
Adam, we
Now,
did have a question come in
yeah,
from David that said, I've worked on surveys where a single question with multiple selection values receives more than one column with a column for each option. Should they also be pivoted to deal with them, or what do you do to handle that kind of data?
Yeah, I just did that. I'm trying to remember what I did to do that. And I think that I ended up combining them. I think that I ended up, yeah, because each one, I think that each one has its own unique variable name. So hopefully if the survey was set up well such that each question was coded well, then each survey, I know this is all kind of like very esoteric, but basically each variable name is going to maybe have its own kind of unique prefix or something like that. So yeah, you would still pivot them all, but then in the dashboard, probably what you would have is, or in the data set is, the question would be something like, list the material.
Example would be somebody's asking what food items you'd like to see in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
And you'd list macaroni and cheese, pizza, and salad. And somebody might select multiples of those. And each of those might be 12A, 12B, and 12C to differentiate those in the data set.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and that's okay, because what you would do, so if it's like 12A, 12B, 12C, when you go to create a chart off of it, you would just chart everything that where it comes from a question that begins with 12, and then they would all get counted. So you would still pivot them all, but then you would collapse them. You would kind of group them once they get into the viz. I hope that helps. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Now, why does this make things easier in the dashboard? So let me open up a dashboard here, Tableau desktop, and I'll demonstrate what it looks like using the pivoted data. And while that loads, it's like we got something from Brenda. What does this allow you to do that a single pivot for all survey questions doesn't? I mean, I think it is that, I guess, except I think the only thing is that you would be missing is you wouldn't necessarily always want to pivot every question. You would want to, as I say, you would want to leave some questions unpivoted if you envision yourself disaggregating on those later on. Hopefully that helps. But okay, so I've opened up Tableau Desktop here using my new pivoted data set. And now I can see it's a much shorter list of fields. And I have these two new things, one that says question, one that says response. This field that says question, you can see is just a listing of all the questions that were in my survey instrument. Response is just a listing of all of the various response codes that are in there. So now, if I wanted to kind of visualize all, say, my Likert scale questions in one in one dashboard or whatever, I wouldn't have to create 5 different worksheets. I could just do it in one if I wanted to. So here's what that would look like. Let's say I add a filter here on question, and I'm gonna check all of these questions here. I just happen to know that those are my Likert scale questions. Those are all kind of similar questions. Then I'm going to take my response field, drag that into rows. I'm going to take my measure that I created called number of responses, which I'll just point out is a count D of response ID. That's important because remember, response ID is duplicated now, so you want to make sure you're getting a distinct count. I'll drag this into the columns, and now I've got a chart, but of course all these responses are combined. So maybe I want to break it out by question. So I take question, drag that into columns, and now you can see it kind of like starting to build out here where I've got a chart showing the answer to the duration question, another one to the knowledgeable question, and so on. So in just those few drag and drops, I've created 5 charts, whereas previously I would have had to create 5 different worksheets. But I could play around with this. I could maybe move question down to rows to get this slightly different look. Another way that I could go about it is by taking the response pill and dragging that into color. And then that's going to give me a much different look and maybe even a better visualization of what I'm looking at. So I could see that the question of the seminar met my expectations had the highest frequency of strongly agree responses, whereas the duration of the seminar was adequate had the lowest frequency of strongly agreed. So yeah, you could kind of just by the few drag and drops, you can create a very robust, insightful set of charts without the need to deal with 500 different columns and 500 different worksheets. I see there's a few questions, so I may have answered these already in the working through it, but let me know if you think there's something I should hit. I'll mention, yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry. One thing about this, when it comes to visualization, notice that, I know we're kind of tight on time, but notice the survey instrument had a before and after question or a pre and post question. What was your Tableau knowledge before the seminar? What was your Tableau knowledge after the seminar? And these types of questions are common in like course evaluations and things like that. And they're often best visualized in like a heat map form. I'll show you what that might look like. So they would often be visualized in this kind of manner, where you've got, so here I've got those two questions, but they're combined into one chart. So I've kind of created this matrix. On the left-hand side, it's how would you rate your knowledge before? And then along the top, how would you rate your knowledge after? So what you would hope to see is kind of this downward diagonal movement of data toward being not as knowledgeable and moving to the knowledgeable section. And I can kind of toggle. So for example, if I toggle on Sally, I can see it looks like that's sort of where the data is moving. And when I hover over the good box, it says, of those who had good knowledge before the seminar, 79% reported very good knowledge after the seminar. So creating that kind of matrix is often a good approach with the pre and post questions or the before and after questions. In terms of shaping the data to best achieve that, there's a couple of considerations. One is that you may not want to pivot your pre and post questions. You may want to leave them as separate columns, because if the pre question is on a different record than is the post question, it makes it a little bit tricky to create this kind of visual. So if they're just side-by-side columns, then you can move them into and they're two pills, you could just move them into a table like this. The other complication that I've seen is if you have a whole network of pre and post questions, you may want to create something in Tableau Prep where you add another instance of the data set into the flow and kind of join it to the pivot. So, you join it to the post pivot data set so that you can line up the pre response to its corresponding post response. That way you don't have to create a lot of complicated logic in the dashboard. I worked on a project recently that had dozens of different pairs of pre and post questions, and each one was kind of smart coded so that you knew which variable name went to pre and post. And so you could kind of join them and match them up in that way. But if you just have one or two different pairs, it's not complicated. You just probably wouldn't pivot it. So yeah, hopefully that kind of helps you get a better sense of how to work with survey data. Again, one of the key things to remember is that the data that you're going to get out of the survey tool is usually often not super usable. It's very wide and difficult to create effective dashboards efficiently. So what you'll commonly want to do is, again, just to pivot the data using Tableau Prep. We showed you how to do that. I could also, and it'll look like this. We can also provide the flow if that's helpful. But again, there's some caveats where you might not want to pivot it in order to facilitate disaggregation downstream. All right. Good. I'll stop there. I know we're out of time. I'll stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, or if I miss any in the chat. So let me know.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. I think we've answered all the ones that have come in through the chat so far. If anyone has any other ones they want to throw into the chat, or you can come off mute as well and ask away. But I don't see anything. I just want to say I really liked that heat map matrix. I hadn't seen the data visualized like that before, and I like the way it kind of showed the flow of where they started and then they're getting better. Hopefully that's what our data would show.
Right. Hopefully, yes.
Awesome. And then
All right.
I believe you said you could share the prep flow and your slides with folks so that they can have access to this.
Yep,
afterwards.
I'll share both along with the Excel file that has the responses.
Awesome. We'll post that on our Tableau user group page as well, and we'll send it out to everyone after this.
Great.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything else come in, so thank you so much. This was really helpful. I think everyone is ready to start visualizing their own survey data.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Okay, let me share my screen. And I've lost the PowerPoint, of course. All right, so I have the honor of introducing my friend and colleague, Maria Lissner. She is an institutional researcher with Kim and me at MiraCosta College. She has expertise in quantitative and qualitative data analysis, program evaluation, and drumroll, survey administration. She also oversees the assessment and reporting of our tutoring program data and student learning outcomes. Like I said, here at MiraCosta. So I am going to turn it over to Maria. She's going to talk all about our sense of belonging survey that she administered and visualized. For us. Let me stop share, Maria, so you can share.
Awesome, thank you. Can you see it? If you can, all right.
Yep, looks good to go.
Great. Thank you, Adam, for all that information. Like Lisa said, I was a big fan of that heat map. That was really cool. Never seen anything like that. But yes, I work with the lovely Lisa Trescott and Kimberly Coots at MiraCosta College. And I'm here simply to give you a little dose of survey dashboard inspiration and show you something that I built recently in our office. At the college, like Lisa said, I mostly oversee tutoring, student learning outcome data assessment, core competency assessment, but I do have a lot of experience with surveys in prior work experiences and current work experiences. This particular survey, for which I'm about to show you the dashboard, it was born out of a Title V grant project that I kind of consult with on campus. I help them figure out how to measure things and how they're going to measure their outcomes. So for this HSI grant, it's really based on building community amongst our Latinx students through onboarding, academic support, embracing their identity, promoting cultural competence among faculty and staff. And as a result of their strategies, they specified that they expected to see an improvement in our Latinx students' sense of belonging at the college. We didn't really have any readily available data on sense of belonging at the time, since it's pretty far outside of the data we normally collect on our students. And so we decided that the best way to kind of get at this idea or this psychological metric that we don't have a lot of information on would be to give an online survey. And that's what we did. And of course, giving our own survey has the added benefit of being repeatable across time. And I'm sure we're going to have to do this again at some point, hopefully not this year, but maybe next year. I'm not going to give too many details on the survey since that's not why we're here. I'm just going to kind of reiterate the sections of the survey so that you understand the way the dashboard is constructed a little bit more. So again, it was an online survey, kept intentionally brief, 21 items, English, Spanish translation, covering essentially these 5 areas here on the right. We had some questions about how students felt about the college overall in terms of belonging, how students felt they belonged in the classroom. Did they feel included and excluded in, spaces, places, communities on campus? And we had students characterize classes they had taken at MiraCosta in the past where they felt they had either belonged or not belonged. And then I added a 6-page, of course, for demographic information. And you can see some examples of our survey items over here. If you have more questions about that, you can ask me later. I knew we would be talking about Tableau prep today. And unfortunately, at the time of creating this dashboard, I did not have access to Tableau prep. And that was a huge bummer. I got about 80% of the way through building this dashboard and I realized some of the stuff I wanted to do is not going to be possible. I ended up downloading a trial version of prep and pivoting some of my data to make some of these graphs. But I will definitely advocate for using Tableau prep if you have access to it. I will never do anything else again with my survey data. As Adam said, you can take it from that wide format into the stacked format, and that's what Tableau likes to use. So I definitely recommend it. You can add a clean step where you identify duplicate cases. I had to do some reverse coding and creating of scale scores, and that can all be done in Tableau Prep ahead of time. Again, you're just trying to make it computationally efficient rather than having Tableau perform all those calculations. I'll go ahead and move on to the dashboard, which is why we're here. Here's the overview page. I don't really want to go into much detail here because I'm trying to get to the good stuff for the sake of time. But I'll just suffice it to say we generally have a description at the top. I included survey methodology. This is unique to the survey dashboard. Generally, we list like our survey pages here and what you can find on them. But I knew people would be interested in our methods. At the bottom, we have this interactivity box because we like to prime our end users for what they can expect to see in terms of clickable, hoverable icons and subsequent pages. And that's what you can kind of see. So I'm going to go ahead and move past all this into what I call my snapshot page. So this is another, I told you we kind of generally list out the pages and what you can find on them, but I decided to be more visually pleasing to do it in this way. I'm kind of a visual person, and I like the idea of using graphics, icons. I'm a huge fan of icons. You can see these here. I created these little icons for each section. These I created actually in PowerPoint and I think just Paint, but there are much more sophisticated methods for creating icons these days. You can use Canva, you can use Illustrator. I know Lisa likes to do that. I'm not fancy. I don't know how to use Illustrator, but you can also use things like Microsoft Designer these days with AI. The possibilities are endless in terms of customization. So at the top of each section, I just have a little icon, a title, a brief description of what you can find on that page, and then an image of what you're going to find on that page and a navigation button to get you there. For people who don't like clicking back and forth between this home screen, I added the arrows, of course, at the bottom. But we'll go ahead and click into our demographics page right now. Yes, I love the snapshot idea also. I got it from Lisa, like many things. So at the top of the page, you can see that I reiterate that icon. I kind of like the little callbacks to the snapshot page, just a reminder. I have the title and the brief description again. And then one of those clickable things that I warned people about on the overview page. And you can see it's just a collapsible container that contains our filters. This is how I tend to do filters. It's just a stylistic preference, I think. I don't really like floating boxes covering the visualizations I'm trying to show people. So that's how I tend to do filters. But you can see I have some bands at the top, and these were just some important numbers. Our overall survey response count. It was an online survey, so I know there was some concern about, us only picking up online students. And you can see here that clearly wasn't the case. And then we have our Spanish survey response rate because we were interested in knowing how many people actually took our Spanish survey that we went to all the trouble to translate. So yes, I would love to take credit for this beautiful visualization that you see. But I cannot. It's definitely something I copied off of Lisa, one of the things she did for one of her demographics pages. And the reason I love it so much is just that it's a beautiful way of showing two proportions and how they compare to one another. So in the blue bars, we have our survey proportions for our demographics, in this case, ethnicity. And in our black bars, we have the college-wide enrollment proportions. I am a thief, that's fine. And then, so I don't know, maybe some of you have this experience. I know when we're working with data and we're summarizing programs or students from a program, invariably the question is always, how does this compare to the college? What does college-wide look like? And so you kind of take the guesswork out of that immediately by just showing it here. The other beautiful thing about this graph and I'll click into it and show you more detail in a second, is just that you can tell immediately what's happening with the proportions by the shading. So the shading is based on this proportionality index that we use sometimes in our community college work. And it just tells you immediately. So the green ones were overrepresented. We don't need to worry about that so much. These red cases are where we are underrepresented. So you can see in our survey, we had an underrepresentation of white, multiracial, and Pacific Islander students. And that might give you some context for understanding the survey results. So these are things that people want to know. Another beautiful Lisa Truscott creation that I will not take credit for are these little pills underneath the chart that say in plain English, what is happening. And I believe she ended up creating these just because some of our populations, like our American Indian and Alaska Native population, are very small. And you can't typically see what's happening here unless you're hovering over it. So you can tell immediately that it's fine. There's a balanced representation and we don't have to worry too much there. Sorry if I'm going fast. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. But if you click into the graph here, you can see that it's a dual axis measure values graph. And my two measure values are my count of survey ID. So again, that's that blue bar compared to the fall enrollment counts, which is the black bar. And this card is on a bar chart, which is why we're seeing the two bars there. But the second card is an area graph, and that's where the PI shading comes in. And so you can see I put PI color or PI color on color. And that's, if you look here, just all the cutoffs for the proportionality index. And we get to color them according to what we want. Yes, PI is proportionality. Does anyone have any questions about this chart before I move on? Tooltips are beautiful. All right, I will go ahead and move on to that next page then. And this is the first kind of survey data page. So you can see it again, I call back to those icons that I had on that first snapshot page. In here, in the info icon, it's one of those hoverable things I warned people about. You see that I put information about there being two different views for the data. So one is categorical and one is a mean scores view. And this is just a basic, simple bar chart with a top sort on it. So you can really see which items were rated highest versus lowest. And so at the top, you can see students were really positive about feeling that the college's resources and opportunities were available to them. But at the bottom end, you can see they weren't so positive about seeing themselves as part of the campus community. I have the overall scale score for this set of items over here on the left. Again, one of those things that you can definitely do in prep before you even get to the analysis stage. I didn't have the luck of doing that, but you can definitely do that. And we tend to put all these plain language summaries at the bottom. So I said overall students agree that they feel a sense of belonging to MiraCosta College, just so people don't have to struggle so much with what does it mean? How do I interpret it? That's something we often do in our office. And you can see that on each of these items as well. I'm going to show you really quickly the categorical view of the data. So it just kind of is the same view, just broken up into categories. I did not use Tableau Prep, so these are all individual worksheets like Adam was talking about. So, okay. And you can see this is kind of important just because we want to see at the lower end, you can see that the lower mean scores were not driven so much by disagreement, but more of this lack of the neither agree nor disagree category getting larger. I'm going to move on to the next survey page. It was built identically because I wanted to keep things pretty consistent. The only difference here is that we have 2 reverse coded items. So here you can see those in red. And you can see I colored those just by putting that tooltip, the asterisk, where I put reverse coded item, I put that on color here. And then I chose to color them differently just so people could see which items were reverse coded. Just for some context, those items were reverse coded because they were worded negatively and the rest of the scale was worded positively. And so to create that scale score, we had to reverse code those items. However, this reverse coding was a little bit confusing to some of the administrators who didn't really understand what it meant or why we had to do it. So I left in the original survey scoring just so they could see how those actually appeared in the survey. And that's just controlled with a parameter that is sheet swapping, I believe. So you can see in terms of wondering if they don't belong here, students really didn't feel that way. It was between none and some of their classes. You might want to put the response scales down here. I put it in English in the tooltip, but it would actually be a little bit more user-friendly, I think, to have it on the scale itself. I'll go ahead and move on to my next questions. These were our perceived inclusion and exclusion items. So it wasn't so much a scale of items. These were just singular items where we asked students to respond to the statement. I felt welcomed and included in one or more communities, groups, and spaces on campus, or I felt marginalized or excluded in one or more communities, groups, or spaces at MiraCosta. It was a dichotomous yes, no answer. For a lot of reasons, we decided not to get into the particulars of this, but we wanted to kind of get a pulse on our students feeling welcomed or excluded in places around campus. I thought that the relative lack of categories would lend itself pretty nicely to a donut chart, which is very easily interpretable when you have two groups, dichotomous, right? So I made donut charts for this overall number, and we can see that 94.7% of our students said they felt welcomed and included, whereas 17.8% said that they felt marginalized or excluded in some way. Yes, the icons, I had to actually, that was a whole, its own process, putting those in the center so that when the charts pop out, they move with the graph. They can't just be floating, unfortunately. Anyway, getting back to this, underneath the donut charts, I have some disaggregated data. So it's just that singular item disaggregated across ethnicity. And I used the 100% stacked bars here because I just think they're really clean. I like that you can include the percent information along with the count information. And I think that gray bar, the 100% bar, just gives you a nice visual on where the end marker is. So the way you create this is just by using a min 1.0 on a dual axis bar chart, and then dual axising it with the proportion, in my case, that said yes to this. And this p.disag is just a disaggregating calculation that controls this disag parameter here. All right. So again, we have all our filters in this collapsible container.
So Maria, I'm just curious, when you
Yes.
said there is a process to add the icons to the donut chart, what was that process?
I know, I'm trying to remember. I think, oh God, I just remember it was a nightmare because it was floating at first, and then I realized it was pushing everything over except the icons, and it was not, I don't know, I can't remember.
So or they must be part of the chart then. Are they
It
an
is.
image?
I think I had to put it, look, how did I do this?
Oh yeah, it's part of the image then.
Yeah, I
Part of
think
the
I had
chart.
to put it in the circle somewhere. Here we go, shape. I had to change the shape. Yeah,
Got it.
that's what it was. It was a custom shape. I got it. So long ago. But yes, we have all our filters there just like normal. This is I'm going to move on to the last page, and then I'll let you guys ask questions if you have any. So this was that question that I talked about where we asked students, you know, think about a class at MiraCosta that you've taken in the past. What were the characteristics of that class where you felt like you belonged? We gave them a lot of reasons, and we let them check as many as they wanted to. We, of course, gave them the space to say, I haven't had that experience, or to give other reasons. But yes, so I listed out all the reasons in the bar chart at top, and you can see, click on a blue bar at the top to see more detailed disaggregated information below. And so I set up a parameter action on the dashboard by just here, dashboard actions. And so you can see this, when I click on the bar, it's going to change the parameter PQ13 that I created in the bars below, or in the graphs below rather. So class feeling like a positive place. 66.8% of our students said that was what contributed to them feeling like they belonged at a class at MiraCosta in the past. We can see that changes across our ethnic categories. And another fancy thing that I copied off Lisa, but did in my own way, of course, was this one variable, two variable disaggregation. So with the, you know, importance of intersectionality, has come the desire for people to want to double disaggregate. I know sample sizes will tend to get small, but sometimes we have categories that are large enough to do this. And when you click on that two variable custom button, it's basically showing a container that has this second graph in it. So this is a completely different graph, and this filter that allows you to add that second disaggregating factor. And so we'll change that. And when I click back on the one variable, it just collapses that container. So it's a show hide container with a button that's custom made. And you can see back to the one variable disaggregation again. All right. So I think that's about where I was going to end. Because for the sake of time, if anyone has questions. Lisa, did you see anything?
I don't think so. I think I see Emmanuel said, have you tried using map layers to impose the icons?
I have never tried that.
Oh, I like that idea. That's a great idea.
Interesting. I'll have to give that a shot. Yeah, no, I have not tried that before. I love Tableau. You can do things like a million different ways. That's the beauty of it. So yeah.
Yeah, map layers 2 let you do more than two dual axis, like a dual axis. You can do like a tri-axis chart essentially. But yeah, I don't see any other questions. Amanda says she's obsessed with this dashboard.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say.
Yeah, did anyone want to come off mute and ask anything? I don't see anything in the chat.
Well,
Just
go forth. Build your survey dashboards.
Oh, Brenda asks, have you needed to explain reverse coding for those who are not familiar with this concept in surveys or dashboards? If so, how do you explain this?
Oh, yes. I had to explain it ad nauseum to people that we were presenting this data to. Just, you know, telling them that we kind of switch around the coding so that, you know, what was a 5 is now a 1, what was a 4 is now a 2, and so on and so forth. Just because it was worded negatively, and you can't have items in the same scale going in two different directions, especially if you're trying to create a scale score, it'll cancel, you know, they'll cancel each other out. So kind of important. And just to be able to see how they relate to the other items in the scale, it's hard when they're on different measurement scales. So that's why we kind of do it that way.
And Dorothy Schmidt asked, how long did this take you to make?
Oh, well, took me a little longer once I figured out that I needed to actually pivot some of the survey data. But maybe a few weeks, a month. I mean, after I got everything together, yeah. And I was working on other stuff, of course. This wasn't my only thing I was working on, so. Yeah,
No, we never have the luxury of a solo focus.
no, that would be nice.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I don't see any other questions in the chat.
All right.
This is Zach Rosen from College of Marin. I just wanted to say that I was proud of my survey dashboard until I saw this one.
Oh,
But
no.
yeah, but do you have is this publicly available? Do you have a link? I would like to show this to other people in my office.
It's not, just because it's using real survey data, and we tend to not disclose those kinds of things. But I mean, if there's something you liked about it, I can send you like screenshots or tell you how I did it. Or if there's something you want to copy, please do. I love to copy Lisa. The more the merrier.
I just put your email in the chat, Maria. I
Thank
hope
you,
that's
Lisa.
Okay,
All right.
yeah, maybe I'll contact you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Please do.
Awesome. And then we'll put Maria's slides, and if she is willing to share some screenshots on our Tableau user group page as well, so that you can see it and steal it. Okay, with that, I believe Sam is up, and she's going to talk about some cool qualitative search features in Tableau.
So okay, sorry, my internet's been going in and out, so if I cut off, I'm really sorry. But also please forgive the very basic dashboard I'm about to show you after seeing such beautiful dashboards. I had the idea to do this maybe like an hour before this meeting started, so this is very quickly whipped together and maybe a little too much for today's meeting, but that's okay. But Lisa posted when she posted this on LinkedIn, she used this picture, so I really, really wanted to build something with it. But basically what I'm going to show you is a very, very small part of this dashboard, and it's just how to search the questions that are on here. So if you want to, you can actually go through and play. There's a bunch of typos. It's just the first data set I found on Google. Please forgive all of the messiness in this. But so if you want to select new questions, you can search for certain things that you want. So if you want to play like a themed game, say I really like birds, I can look at all the questions that have the word bird in them, and I can pick through those, right? And so doing this is actually pretty simple. So let me show you here. So it's really just 3 steps. First, you make a parameter. So it's just a string parameter with that allows all values, and you just set the current value to blank. So that's the very first step. And then you can call it whatever you want. I usually call it search, and then whatever you're trying to search, and then OK. And then next, I want to make sure that what I'm typing into the search actually provides a match to the list that I'm looking through. So the next thing I do is make a calculated field. And it's just, does the column that I'm looking at contain what I typed into the search, right? So this is the parameter that I created, and this is the column that I'm searching through. And so this one's simple. It's just one column that I want to search through. And so I click OK. And so here, if I'm interested in like stamps, I can search for it. If I'm interested in, I think another one was, yeah, if I want to do like a job related one, I can search that. And so, oh, sorry, I skipped a step. To actually get the search to work, you have to add this as a filter. And so once you set it to true the first time, it should be fine. Once I start searching something like bird, when I go back to edit filter, there will be that false. You just want to make sure that's not checked when you search something. And then as long as it's just set to true, it'll show all of your matches. So that's really all it is. And this is just applied to all the sheets that I want the search to take place on. And so, yeah, it's very simple. One more thing I want to show you is I built this whole dashboard literally just to show you all that today. It took about 2 minutes, but this is fun. Where I really use it is we have this dashboard dictionary that our users can search through. And so here, I want to search multiple columns because I want to search, okay, is it in the term name? Is it in the definition? Or is it even in the dashboard name? And so what I do here, And I'll go to this one. It's just an or statement. So it's the same thing as before. Does the column I'm searching contain this, what I typed into the search bar? And here, since I have multiple columns that I'm searching, I just need to check all 3 of those. And so that's basically the only difference between this search and the other one. But yeah, that's it. So are there any questions about searching qualitative text on dashboards?
So you said you use this as a data dictionary for users, or did I?
Yes, yeah. Oops.
That's
So
an
here,
awesome idea.
so if I like, I'm interested in gender, which dashboards does gender have? I can see it and the definition. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I just forgot to look at the chat.
So sorry, this is getting off topic of the actual functionality, but do you have, so this dashboard is for your users and you keep track of all the dashboards that use that field? How do you do that?
Manually.
Okay.
So it took a few hours when I set this data set up. It did take, I went through and I was like, okay, here's all the data, here's all the dashboards we have, here's all the terms in each one of them. It's a lot of it's copy and paste, right? Because like demographics are going to be on every single dashboard.
Yeah.
It also is like how I set up the data. So like it's 4 different sheets in an Excel file. And it's just terms and definitions on one, and then dashboard descriptions on another. That way I'm not having to like edit the same field multiple times. Yeah, everything just appears once. But yeah, so very, very basic. Yeah. Any
Basic,
other
but the end product is
questions?
awesome. I love this for
I
a data
know.
dictionary. We've been talking about how to like tag our dashboards and stuff for people to find things easily. So this could definitely be something we could steal from you.
I just need your help making it look nice, because yeah. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions about, oh, does the data dictionary also include information about the database tables? So depends on what you mean, right? And how like granular you're trying to get. So like for age group, it does have like, these are the possible values, right? But it doesn't have anything about the like where it's coming from, if that's what you're asking. This is as informative as it gets, I guess.
Right, because I think if you're using it like as an
I
analyst,
don't
you
think I
might need to
missed any
know
questions.
where it's coming from. But end users probably don't
We
care.
do have, I forget what it's called, but oh, sorry, I'm getting the internet is unstable thing. I cut you off, Lisa.
Okay.
But I was gonna say we do have the thing in Tableau, I forget what it's called, where we have like the lineage, so we can see all of that. All the analysts can see that in our Tableau cloud website. Yeah.
Like the management, the data manager, or
Yeah, I think that Tableau management something, Tableau
yeah.
cloud management, yeah. So that has all that information. Yeah, data management add-on.
There
Thank
we
you.
go. Everything's an add-on.
Okay, so let's feel free to ask more questions if you have any. I'm just going to wrap up the meeting. These are the steps that I just showed you. But so please join us for our next meeting on April 30th. We are having the Chancellor's office come out and talk about Data Vista. So we're going to be living the Data Vista. And I just realized I probably shouldn't have put that G there, but that's fine. And so the research and data analytics team from the Chancellor's office will come and have a whole presentation on Data Vista and how they used Tableau for it. So please join us for that. And then we'll have a debrief, so that this is 2 weeks after the conference. So we'll come back and kind of talk about the useful presentations for this specific group. And then, as always, please feel free to share something with us if you want to present, if you have office hours ideas, if there's anything, any suggestions, comments, feedback you have, please let us know. Here's our contact information. And then, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope to see you at the conference if you're able to.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat who is going to the conference. Pete said he's going on his computer. I know there was definitely virtual aspects of it. But But are other people going, okay, Dorothy, I think David gave a thumbs up, David Liska. Because we would love to meet you all in person. Instead of just virtually, since this is a virtual tug. Pete says he'll wave. We'll wave to you too, Pete.
Yes.
But yeah, seriously, email us and let us know if you're going. So, and we will not most likely, we will be at the higher ed meetup. So if we don't catch you at the conference at another time, definitely come to the education meetup because we will be there ready to hang out with you all.
There and data night out.
Yeah, we'll
as well.
obviously data night out. Yeah. We'll be
Yeah.
there to cheers you at data night out. Just
Yes.
not at the meeting, at the meetup. And we'll cut this portion of the meeting out of our recording. Awesome. Well, we hope to see you all in April to talk about Data Vista and debrief on the conference.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And thank you again to Adam and Maria.
Thank you all. Bye.
I waved at my computer and my